All
right, everyone, welcome to round 3 of MIDP 2016. I'd like to invite the Prime Minister to begin the debate.
Oh.
I think it's my pen.
Cultural appropriation, okay. Daddy.
Should I cover that?
When you become a second choose.
Where? Oh.
Let's wake up from this dream that we're in a fantasy world. That we're living in a fantasy world where resources are infinite. That we're living in a fantasy world where everyone can get the same amount of resources, that everyone can get the same amount of healthcare, and that everyone becomes happy, and everyone cannot be scared of the possibility of them dying because they don't have resources. We have to recognize the context in this debate, where firstly, in any given state, in status quo, resources are finite. This means that in any given society, in any given state, governments have to not only calibrate, but also have to set a standard as to how they allocate resources and making sure that they choose the best metric possible in allocating said resources. And for that reason, open government believes that the best metric lies on our side. The second context that we have to recognize in this debate, ladies and gentlemen, is that allocation for resources and healthcare is something that is allocated to everyone and as much as we can, and it is something that everyone is entitled to. Now, given that everyone is entitled to the same resources and the same care by the state, we also have to take that as well as the finite resources that we have into consideration and decide what is the most equitable and what is the fairest way in allocate said resources. What do we support from opening government? Firstly, we support companies like Facebook giving access to the state to the lifestyle of an individual. This means looking through their pictures, looking through their statuses, looking through in any way when they're exposed to the real world, of them drinking, of them skydiving, of them smoking up, of them in love with restaurants called the Heart Attack Grill, for example. All of these are indicators as to the lifestyle of a person, and we believe that the state should have access to these things. The second thing we support is the state to recalibrate the allocation of resources. These include things like the amount allocated to a person upon subscription to said healthcare. This includes things like the order of prioritization when they were to get a transplant or when they were to get any sorts of healthcare that when they're in line. But most important thing that has to be made in this debate, in the instance where a person is at the brink of death and he has nowhere else to turn to and he has no other alternative, we are fine with him cutting the line, and we're fine with him giving resources to him if it comes under that, regardless of the lifestyle that he lives. But beyond that, however, if you are fine and if you have other alternatives, or if you live a lifestyle, if you're not dying but you still live a bad lifestyle, then you will be deprioritized, maybe even be at the bottom of the list, and we are okay with that. For that reason, the stance from opening government is that the state has a duty to remain fair and equitable. The allocation of something as important as resources, the burden that we'll take under our side is that given the reality of the state and resources, why this is the most optimal metric for us to use, they must prove to us why whether any other metric would be optimal and ethical in this debate. I'll talk to you about two things. Firstly, I'll talk to you about why prioritization based on this metric is important. Second of all, why is it justified for the state to have access to this information and have access to the private lives of individuals. No, thank you, sir. Let's look firstly on the prioritization based on this metric. So I've already explained the first reason, which is that resources are extremely limited. This means that medical expenses, costs, are all things that are extremely exorbitant as they stand right now. If the state, as they stand, could magically absorb all the costs of medical expenses and also medication, then we're fine with that. But unfortunately, we don't live in that world. We live in a world where, no thank you, we live in a world where cost and also the amount that is needed to get that said thing is something that we cannot change based on supply and demand as they stand, and we have to recognize that in this debate. Yes, sir.
Just specifically about your model, at the end there, you said that if the person was dying, you'd be willing to concede your principle and allocate resources there. So you're okay prioritizing when they don't need it, but when they actually do need healthcare, you're not going to prioritize them.
that everyone who lives a bad lifestyle are not all going to die immediately. So we're okay and understand the fact that these individuals would probably get the less likelihood and the less risk of needing that allocation of resources. But more importantly, we try to maximize and making sure that everyone lives as much as we can. So in instance where they have to die and whether, sorry, not have to die, we don't need to die. As much as they really would die at that point, we will save them if we can. But if it comes down to them being compared to a lot of other people who are dying, then we'll look at the priority of lifestyle as well. We're fine with that. No, thank you. Now, given the limited resources that we have right now, we then have to be comparative. Under their world, it would be extremely unfair for us to prioritize resources on people who have made active decisions in their lifestyles in lessening their probability of living either further or lessening the probability of them not contracting any diseases. And the reason why this is particularly equitable on the our side of the house is because the state must recognize two important things. The first is that the state must recognize the possible risk that is being applied and that's being shown to everyone. Everyone has a certain amount of risk as to how they would live and how they would die and the rate of people living and also dying. Recognizing this, the second thing that we have to recognize is the fact that everyone is entitled to healthcare. So given this, if we were to look at a person who has lived an extremely healthy lifestyle but unfortunately contracted a disease that they have never consented to or they have never lived their lifestyle in a way where they would warrant that said disease, and we think it's extremely unfair and abhorrent for them to be withheld these same resources just because we're busy treating someone who's done all the things that would have given them that resources anyway. In that instance, that is extremely fair. Secondly, let's look at, there's an analogy that I want to include here. The same way in which why banks in status quo look at the credit rating of an individual whenever they give out loans. And the reason for this is because, one, the banks want to make sure that they are optimal with the services that they provided to people and they have money for everyone for any rating that they may possibly have. It's analogous here. Secondly, why is it justified for the state to have access to these private data and private data of citizens? Just like how a company will be obligated to give information of a private person for the sake of national security, it's also important for us to be able to have access to instances of life and death. And the reason for this is because, firstly, ladies and gentlemen, data under status quo is something that's extremely hard to get. This means that if the state has to base the allocation of healthcare on the lifestyle of an individual, they will always have to get people to publish their lifestyles or people to report their lifestyles once a year. This is something that people are unlikely to do or people would be very extremely lazy to do. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it's also something that is not really the most detailed or the most comprehensive of data that is collected there. If you were to look at Facebook, it's a medium where everyone has access to, where everyone is extremely favorable in using. Now, given this, ladies and gentlemen, data collection is far better on the outside. But more importantly, in deciding what is fair and what is equitable for someone to be deprived of allocation of healthcare or not, this is a matter of life and death. This is a matter that the state has always considered when it comes to reaching the private life of an individual. Be fair and also equitable within the horrible reality that we're living in status quo. We're extremely proud to propose.
Right, thank you, PM, and at the end of
Inside opposition, we believe that healthcare should be a fundamental right, especially when it's provided by the state. There should be no discrimination. We will allocate. We agree that resources are finite, and therefore our allocation will be based on purely needs basis. So if someone is in more need of a dire or more urgent healthcare, we'll give it to that person. That's how generally countries function. Before I go into my arguments, a lot of rebuttals will be integrated. I'll show you what I did there. But before that, something that don't really fit. We really think that the model set up by government is quite soft or really not quite sure what they're standing for. Because on one hand, you are taking into account the needs of people and the people who need healthcare. You're also taking into account the lifestyle choices of these people make. So to what extent does one of these factors weigh over the other? And as Nick rightly pointed out, right? So at the point by which people really need that healthcare, you're also going to give that healthcare to them anyway, which then contradicts all of your principle in which first place you're saying these people make that choice to die. So if they make that choice to put themselves in a situation of dire need of healthcare or else they're going to die, why are you not still upholding that principle of prioritizing other people over them? So, done with that, let's go into my substantiations. So firstly, on this principle of why it's important for us to not discriminate people, where especially when it comes to fundamental things such as healthcare, and we'll also include other things like education as well, because we think these are just general public services that the state owes a duty to provide to everyone regardless of their lifetime choices. Especially when we talk about the healthcare faculty, we think their duty to exist is to treat and save lives, not to make moral judgments. But you have a clarification. Yeah.
Just for clarification, what is the metric that you're using in order to allocate resources?
Only needs-based. So if one person who has in a more dire situation, you don't get it over the other. That's all. So healthcare faculty, we think its duty, of course, is to leave moral judgment and political judgment out of the window. Why? Because it concerns the right to life. It concerns the life and death of a person, as what you said in OG, which all other rights stem from. So when you make punishment and judgment, so let's look at like even the criminal justice system, when we do pass judgment on people, the end goal of a state is always to restore, for example, to rehabilitate and reintegrate people into society with the end goal of restoring people into functional members of the society. That's why regardless how fucked up people come up and when we come into the hands of the state, we owe a duty to treat them just as human beings and nothing else, and because we trust in their fundamental humanity and their potential to be good. We trust that this person who has made the choice to eat like all the fast food that they have in the past 10 years have a chance and a potential to change after this treatment that they receive, and that's something that you cannot take away from any person. No, thank you. This is where we're talking about healthcare and life-saving treatment. Similarly, why we also treat even prisoners of war, terrorists, murderers, and drug dealers, even when they have explicitly made the choice to make life hell for other people, but moral judgment cannot enter the doors of a hospital or medical facility because it is functioning for humanitarian sake. And what is the harm then? When we start measuring whether people deserve these fundamental rights, we think it's highly dangerous because it harms the weakest in our society. Statistically speaking, these people who are going to need healthcare and treatment from the government the most are the people who are poor and other people who have no other avenue and no other alternatives. So when they say in their model that if these people have other alternatives, we won't prioritize them, there won't be such people existing, because if they do have alternatives, most people won't want to wait that long queue in like public or government hospitals, right? So statistically, we don't think we should measure whether people deserve to be helped, because if you look at that, right, utilitarianly speaking, people who are poorer have a higher chance or likelihood of being involved in crime and lesser likelihood of achieving academic success. Does that mean because we have a lesser return on interest, lesser ROI, that means we don't have to invest in their education? We don't think states should ever function on those premises. This is the difference between state and private insurance companies. One is for profit, the other is to safeguard the well-being of citizens, and we think that is something that you should never take away from people. I'll take a POI from closing. Okay. Yeah.
But don't you think it's essentially different because you didn't choose to be born in a poor neighborhood, but you did choose to go for a run, or inversely choose to smoke? How do you factor those things in?
Okay, I think in the Facebook algorithm, living in a dangerous neighborhood also constitutes to a risky lifestyle as well. So that is something nicely going into my argument. I'll also include the choosing to go to job argument in my argument as well. So let's talk about lifestyle choices and what are the factors. Number one, we think a huge factor in which people base their lifestyle choices on can be state failure. For example, if you are born into poverty in a dangerous neighborhood where crimes rates are extremely high, or if you have to take on dangerous jobs, or you work on an oil rig or construction sites because you are born in certain situations or because those situations are just not what you can control, these people often rely on state help. These people similarly because of choices that they never had a stake in. It is state failure. When you say lifestyle choices such as your diet and your reluctance to go on like exercise, for example, the state's failure to control big sugar, to allow big fast food companies to set up their stalls every 1 kilometer apart from every street, like just affects the whole society in which the lifestyle we choose. So we think it's unfair to punish these people because state was complicit as well. But if you really want to go into the line of people don't deserve healthcare because they could have done something to help themselves, then you will also want to penalize people who work long hours or choose not to exercise because they are making their choice to put their lives in risk. But why is it important that the state never go into this private sphere of interfering or judging the lifestyles of people? Because that's a private and a sacred sphere where people should have the liberty to live their lives and to know that their fundamental rights will still be safeguarded by the state regardless, right? So what have I told you? Essentially, a lot of these lifestyle choices are not their own choices anyway. A lot of them are based on states' complicitness in allowing those lifestyle choices to happen. Or even if you go like bungee jumping or jogging, right, in like, I don't know, dangerous places, restricting those choices also like deeply discount your quality of life and therefore should not happen regardless. Proud to oppose.
Yeah.
Right, thanks a little while for the APM.
He likes you.
He likes when we use to rest. Panel, when it comes to assessing how efficient a state must be in optimizing the limited resources a state has, we also have to account for the fact that sometimes individuals who think that states are absolutely beholden to them can risk their lives as well as risk the relationship between them and the state in like overstepping what kind of lifestyle do you choose to live, like expecting the state to come in and care for you at the end of the day. I think it is important to note that when it comes to the state being able to reprioritize individuals, we must also account for the fact individuals in status quo who do not choose to risk their lives, who do not place themselves in positions in which they would harm themselves, and at the same time taking away allocation from individuals who live a straight life, who don't actively risk themselves by their behavior or what they choose to engage in. And I think it is unfair if we're going to say there's an absolute ability for these people to just like claim state resources, ladies and gentlemen. Before I move on to my three issues, I have one clarification and two responses to make to all the opposition. One is this whole gripe about individuals who are currently dying. I don't think that this is principally this defeats the entirety of the purpose of the model, because Izzat was very clear, ladies and gentlemen. When it comes to an individual who, for example, jumps out of a plane and he's currently broken and split apart and his liver is hanging out of his body and you need to deal with him at that current moment, they will be happy to help him in that instance. I don't think it's also about always giving him like consistent healthcare or like consistently free medication whenever he goes to that clinic. And I think this is already done in status quo. When you have transplant lists for organs, individuals who are alcoholic aren't high up in the list to begin with, but if he suffers like liver failure currently, then he'll be pushed up the list. I think this is principally consistent, and in that application, I think we were clear with that. Two groups of individuals that open opposition want to talk about. One is this individual who are poor, right? So I think Izzat was very clear in his speech in talking about it doesn't matter what sort of like economic group you're from. If you choose to engage in a behavior that's problematic and risky in nature, because I think there's an ability to ask him what sort of risky behavior do individuals engage with. So for example, if you choose to always party all the time, or if you choose to like drag race down the street, or if you choose like always ride a motorcycle and never wear a helmet, or never put a helmet onto your child, I think this is something that we can adjudicate to be a risky behavior to begin with. But secondly, they say, well, look, like it's also about the neighborhood that you live in because there's a propensity of harm. One, I think the difference is how individuals choose to spend their time and what they do with it. But secondly, I think if the debate is about the poorest of the poor living in seedy neighborhoods, one, I don't think these are the people, that are going to actively check in. But secondly, check in on Facebook or like log and show people, hey, look at the neighborhood I'm living in, it's that really shitty, right? But secondly, even if it's true, I think it incentivizes either them moving out those areas or pushing for their representatives to better public housing or access to public housing for these individuals. There's an impetus for a discussion to happen rather than to say, like, it's enough that you live in that area, so long and so forth that we provide public healthcare for you, that's enough of a responsibility that we can give to you. No. Secondly, on prisoners, right? Because they say we already accord moral responsibility and we already care for prisoners. The distinction between prisoners that we currently care for in status quo is that these are individuals that we hold in authority, these are individuals that we hold in security, and therefore we have the option to dictate the choices that they currently live in when they are on our state healthcare. That means that they can't like take our state healthcare and then continue inflicting harm onto other individuals. But similarly, it doesn't apply here to other individuals because they can still choose whatever they want to do with their life. They can still access liberty, and we think that liberty is limited. That's a concern. I think that in status quo, there's an overall obligation that society commands from the state and expects states to push up onto them. And I think that this is based on the guise of social contract when they say, well, we pay taxes and therefore you should give back to us. No, thank you, I'll speak later. But I think what it never accounts for is that individuals are very individualistic in nature where they view their relationship with the state, in that they don't think of it as a communal responsibility or a collective effort within that community, which means that often the calculation of like risky decision or being risk averse into participating in certain lifestyles never account risky lifestyle, and the state always has to like reallocate a lot more to me than it takes away from an individual who don't have the same kind of risk but may need the same sort of allocation as well. Let's look at healthcare as an issue in status quo. What we must understand as well is that it's not an attractive point of discussion to exist in status quo because people don't think too much about healthcare past the point of the economic idea of healthcare, right? In that it's just number. It's never about how much do I get out of it, it's rather how much do I have to spend for it and what is my obligation to everyone else. The reason why it's never a popular discussion is because health is a far-reaching concept that people can't visualize that this is something that's going to happen to me. So people never really think I'm going to die or that I'm at risk for something. So even the individuals who engage in risky lifestyle, risky behavior know it at the back of their mind, but they don't even acknowledge to what extent is it a risk for them to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. So all they see is this like numbers game and participation, and that's why there's a lot of calls for the state to give back to society no matter what it means to these individuals, right? I think what it does is it creates a contentious discussion because people don't understand the concept of net benefit to society because all they can see is myself, ladies and gentlemen. What we do is that we make it more favorable for everyone else to participate in a discussion about healthcare and how much money are they willing to add on to the state resources, or how much are they willing to participate in terms of like giving more money to the state, because it allows them to see what sort of risk am I inculcating in my decision, or what sort of risk are we going to face when we are paying a certain allocation for other people to use. And this is really important because it makes healthcare a lot more of a palatable discussion rather than just to say we don't want to engage at all. Before that, I'll take opening.
When people really think that these risks don't apply to them, how effective is this policy in creating deterrence for people to not engage in risky lifestyle?
The reason why they don't feel deterrence in status quo because they know there is a cushion that's going to catch them at the point at which they fall, or they know if they suffer from cancer that every stage of the chemotherapy can be applied for state resources in order for them to be able to use. But we think that's the comparative difference here. If you tell them that you don't have access to this as much as you do, or you aren't prioritized over everyone else, right, then that shows an impetus to people that perhaps I should start reformulating how I'm currently living my life. Because if you look at open opposition, and I hope closing will be a lot better at this, is that they want to rely on hope altruism, right? I think there's an issue here. Because if you're going to say